Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Hello, mate.
G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm very good, very
That's
good. Hey, today's a very good episode, I reckon.
I cannot wait.
On the 100th episode, do you remember we promised that the next 100 would be the best yet? I think today is definitely delivering on that.
I know that I'll actually listen to this episode, whereas I don't listen to any of the episodes. I guarantee you I'm going to revisit this episode because I'm a big fan of who we're going today.
Well, we've got a special guest. Before we get there today, Ben, we'll go to the Mindset Minute.
Sure.
A good Henry Ford quote is always a good one, but when everything seems to be going against you, remember that the aeroplane takes off against the wind, not with it. So, and another extension of that is remember that the plane uses most of its fuel during takeoff and climb. Yeah. And when it levels off, it doesn't use as much. So the context for that for a property portfolio is it's exactly the same.
Totally.
When you're building the portfolio in that space where you're buying a property, you are burning lots and lots of mental energy. Mm-hmm. But as you and I wrote in the book, it takes sort of 10 hours a year once you've leveled off.
Correct.
And you're in that pattern that it doesn't take as much of your time. So the key is to take action.
Yeah, it is, and I think when we listen to other experts coming on the show, we basically hear them sort of saying, if you've missed one or missed two, you've got to keep basically picking yourself up and having another go at the next one, because the reality is it's a busy market out there, and you may not get everyone that you're after. Yeah. So, and some people give up. And, that's why we want to focus on, and I think that's a really great analogy there in terms of bringing that focus in and basically, staying true to the game.
Shout out to the Melbourne and Sydney buyers right now. They're going against the wind right now. But if you're in Perth or Darwin, it's a little bit easier.
A bit more days on market, a bit more stock on market.
Makes it a bit easier. But as we said at the top, Ben, very special guest today, Chris Helder. We met Chris at the Better Business Summit last month. He's the best-selling author of The Ultimate Book of Influence. He's also authored Useful Belief.
Yes.
Because it's better than positive thinking.
I love it.
And he's a dynamic presenter and highly entertaining speaker on influence. He's a certified practitioner in Neuro-Linguistic Programming, Ben. We've got to find out a bit more about that.
Too right.
And he lives in Melbourne with his wife, Lucy, and their three boys, Jake, Billy and PJ. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, thanks so much, guys, for having me on.
It's a pleasure. So you live in Melbourne. How do you explain that accent?
I know. It's 21 years over here, and, I met a girl in a bar in Los Angeles. One thing led to another, and you know how it goes. I took a big step, though, this year, guys. Australia Day, I jumped in, and I don't know why it took me 21 years, but I finally made the jump and became an Australian citizen.
Well done.
There you go.
Well done. What was that like? You got to do the questionnaire?
I did the questionnaire, yeah. So I did pretty well.
So give us your best g'day, mate. Come on.
G'day, mate.
Sound like a true American.
Exactly. I don't think you ever lose it.
Yeah, very good.
For the benefit of the listeners, what is NLP and how can the everyday person apply it in their life?
Look, I did a NLP course a number of years ago, and effectively it's Neuro-Linguistic Programming, Neuro-Brain Linguistic Language, and Programming, basically habits. So taking a look at brain language and the habits that we create, and the habits in terms of how we communicate with other people, and most of all, how we communicate with ourselves.
Now, useful beliefs.
Yep.
I mean, people are probably going to say, what does all that mean? I mean, I love the story you tell about being on the plane. So take us through how you conceptually came up with this concept.
I think in being a speaker for the last 16 years and working at different conferences and working with different organizations, it was just very apparent to me that people would go to a conference and they'd get really excited, and then they'd come back and they'd fall into the same habits over and over again. And they try to be positive, and I think we've all had the experience of waking up one morning going, hey, let's just be positive today. Come on, Chris, be positive today. And then by 10 o'clock, when you can't sustain that level of positivity, you actually feel worse about yourself than when you started. So it really was taking a look at it and saying, hey, positive thinking's not working. And the studies show this, and really starting to think about what's useful. So what's a useful thing for me to go do every day? If I am at ground zero in my business, what's going to get me from 0 to 2? What are the most useful actions for me to take? What are the most useful things to get from 2 to 5 or 5 to 8 or wherever we are in our business? And the extension of that became useful belief. And it really was starting to think about we create our truth. Effectively, we create our truth, and we all have a reality. I imagine many of your listeners out there today have created a reality. They wake up next to a certain person every day. They got children down the hallway. They got a job. They got a mortgage. And if you're not going to change that reality, and I think that's the key. I mean, I suppose anyone could go out there and change it. But if you're not going to change it, then you might as well have a useful belief about it, and we can create a truth. So, for example, this is the best time ever to be in property. This is the best time ever to be in your business. This is the best time ever to be alive. And I suppose the effective science behind it is we've all got a brain, and that brain has a filter. That filter is called the reticular activating system. But quite simply, if you believe this is the best time in the history of the world to be alive, you walk outside and you see beautiful things. If you believe this is the best time to be in property, you find opportunities. And that's really your brain at work filtering all those different things.
I mean, look, obviously I've read the book. It's fantastic. Yeah. I had an unuseful belief around the generation of my kids are entitled.
Yeah.
You know, and Bryce and I have been having a little bit about, God, did we have that many toys when we were kids? Did we get all of these contraptions to keep us
No, we
busy?
didn't, by the way.
No, we didn't. So whereas in the book you do talk about, this next generation of kids are the best ever, and if you have that useful belief, you can really get around them and connect with them better and basically get more positive outcomes rather than trying to take them down your channel. I mean, they don't know they've got it better, do they?
They don't. And really, when you take a look at it, I meet a lot of people who are like, oh, this generation today. And, guess what these bosses have? They have a retention problem, right? Yeah. Because they're not engaging with this generation. This is the most exciting time to be engaging with young people. They know more, they're smarter, they're more energetic, they got more access to information. It is a great time to be a part of Generation Y and be a part of what they're doing. And when you believe that, they like it. And they respond to you, and they actually connect with you, and you connect with them. So, it's not going the other way. I always talk about our generation probably had more two circles. There was a professional way to be and a personal way to be, and we didn't cross those circles over that much. This generation, it's one circle. It's life. And it's, they're doing everything all the time at one time and really dialing into that circle.
Now, obviously, we've jumped into the useful belief stuff. We should have started with the backstory. When you came to Australia, what were you doing before you started to be, one of Australia's best speakers?
I was working in Los Angeles, and I met my wife, and I was working in a place called Compton, California, and I was working with underprivileged kids, and I was teaching school, and I was a part of this program, which was a part of the Bill Clinton administration. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I got married. When I got married...
Hang on, Compton, that's a rough part of town.
It was a rough place, straight out of Compton. And it was an amazing experience, and, at the time, we were doing some great things there. And anyway, I got married. And when I got married, the MC of my wedding happened to own a real estate company. And he said, when you move to Australia, give me a call, I'll give you a job. And I said, well, we live in Los Angeles, we're doing this. And of course, you know what? My wife, a few months later, she said, we should actually go back to Australia. And,
happy wife, happy life.
Happy wife, quiet life.
I think that's it. And one thing led to another. I did give him a call, and I started in real estate in 1996 in Melbourne. And I think the following year, I was the novice auctioneer champion for Victoria. So,
wow,
and I was out there calling auctions. And
what useful belief did you have to build up to that?
It's actually, you know what? My useful belief, really, I think starting out was coming over here and not knowing anybody and starting from scratch. I remember one of the first things, this guy rang me up and he said, he goes, send me the information up to my office in Albury, mate. And I wrote it down exactly as he said it, Albury, mate, A-W-B-R-E-Y-M-A-T. And I had one of those old postcode books, and I couldn't find Albury, mate anywhere in there. And I remember asking some of the other agents, where's Albury, mate? And I think they went, could be Albury, mate. And, anyway. But starting from there, a useful belief was that an American can come out here and, create opportunity. And I think a lot of people told me I couldn't, so.
Fantastic. So a couple of years on the sales side, straight into auctioning. In the marketplace, what were some of your observations that you were able to be successful in what you're doing?
Absolutely. I think it's actually, when we talk about talking about real estate or talking about sales in general.
Yeah.
Without question, I think it is a very simple process. I think it really is certainty, being absolutely certain about what message that you're sending out there. It's simplicity. I think it's organizing yourself in a way that your message and your business is set up so it's very tangible. And then I think effectively it is time management. I think it's mastering that. And one of the keynotes I'm talking about at the moment is cut the noise. And my observation of not just property but all salespeople is that the salespeople who are absolutely most effective spend the majority of their time doing income producing activity. And they're spending their time focused on the things that get them result. And the average agent, the average salesperson, the average property manager is spending their time effectively working on non-income producing activities. That's the key. The key is really making sure that you're dialed in, and I think planning as part of that. So you're planning the night before. You're walking in every day with a dead set diary that's full. And people always say, "Oh, Chris, but things come up in the course of the day." You know what? If you walked into a full day that was dialed into 30-minute blocks, and you dialed into that, and you worked 80% to that. Working 80% to a full day is a whole lot better than walking into an empty day. And I think it's that level of productivity, that level of income production, that's going to make the difference.
From those people that you've observed doing that, it's easy to give lip service to time management. How do actually people then honour that sort of the dollar productive activity? It sounds great on paper, but being able to be the person that does focus on the dollar productive activity and not be the one with the excuses. That's the challenge.
That is the challenge. And I think, I think often it's, go back to useful belief a little bit, but first useful belief is that there's opportunity everywhere in my marketplace. I think the second useful belief is I have the ability to control my time and my day. And number three is, that I'm absolutely crystal clear about what it is that I want to go do. There's no question clear goals drive behavior. And if you're absolutely clear about what it is that you want, you'll follow that direction, you'll follow that behavior. And it is literally sitting down. I always say to people, sit down on Sunday night and plan out a week. And I know so many people have this.
I do that.
They have the ideal weeks that they are generically run off though, and they're color coded. And I say to people, probably take your generic ideal week and run that through the shredder. That's probably gonna get it done. Instead, every week's different, and every week's different. So sit down on Sunday night, plan out that sort of mock week, put all the meetings in, put where you want to be, where you want to prospect, and then revise that every day. Boom. So every night before you get in. But there's no question, that the planning the night before sets you in motion for that next day.
Goals drive behaviour, Ben. So that's clear for in terms of people in property investing planning. That'll drive the behaviour. It'll drive the behaviour of how they manage their money under the roof. It'll drive the behaviour on the decisions they make, and ultimately drive the behaviour of their outcomes.
So in terms of dollar productive activity, when it comes to looking and getting a great outcome in residential property, I would say the most dollar productive activity needs to be spent in the research piece. You're trying to identify the best locations, the best way to go about getting into those best locations. And the reality is you've got 15,000 suburbs, you've got thousands of markets within markets. How do you get productive into that space? Well, they're the frameworks that we've talked about before, which is basically look for owner-occupier appeal. Don't look for investment stock, look for investment grade property. So they're the types of things we're doing. So before we move
Abraham Lincoln, if you've got 6 hours to cut down a tree, spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe, that's looking for the location.
Totally it is. And so, Chris, before we move on to more around useful beliefs and mindset, just finishing off the conversation around your real estate experience, when you were dealing with buyers, what were some of the mindsets that those buyers were in that you needed to bring around to get the result and knowing that you're helping them make change in their life?
Look, I think, the number one thing that stops people in general is that level of anxiety or that level of fear. And one of the things I talk to people about is give yourself permission to be successful. And when you give yourself permission to say, listen, I'm going to be a property investor, or give myself permission that I'm going to have a crack at this, and really thinking about that risk that's there, and saying, hey, there's risk in everything that we do, and really deciding, hang on, I've done my research, I'm in a position that I'm ready to go, I want to be a property investor, and then it is really taking that anxiety and turning it into an action signal.
Yeah, brilliant.
So if we reverse back to what you said before about in those projects in Compton, that's a tough neighbourhood. What sort of useful beliefs would you coach someone in that scenario to help them move through that circumstance?
You know, you're going back a long time for me, but I got put in a situation where
If you were going back there today,
no,
what would you
I
do?
got thrown in a situation. I had 37 kids. The school had we had 7 shootings in the 2 years at a primary school that I was working at.
Primary school.
Because it backed onto a park,
Oh,
and there was
God.
gang stuff that happened there. Look, I think they thought it was funny. They put me in charge of security at the school. You know, the reality of it is we had a lot going on. And at that time, I certainly hadn't formulated the words useful belief. But without question, every day, it was a useful belief. I'm making a difference. And, you know, we're making an impact. Again, talk about goal-driving behavior. I showed up every day. And I showed up every day because, you know, I wanted to make a difference to those kids. And we did. They were great kids.
What a great initial, how do I get this job done? Well, I just have this great attitude. I mean, just a quote from your book here, it says, the mind harbours what the body manifests.
Yeah.
So straight away, if you can set that, give yourself permission to be successful. Give yourself permission to have the confidence that you can make change.
Yeah.
Amazing, isn't it, what the eyes then open up?
It is. And you know, I think so many people, we talk about all the noise that's out there today, and I think there's massive noise for all of us. And you know, I do conferences with people, and they're trying to be a great parent. They're trying to be a great partner. They're trying to do a good job at work, and they're trying to, you know, still make money, and they're trying to still. The good thing is they have to stay young and fit and healthy, and all these different circles of our life, and
Pressures
and
everywhere.
all the pressures that come in everywhere. And this bit about giving permission, you know, one of the things I talk about is 10 seconds of guilt. Move on, bang. I recognize I can't be all things, and I talk about it as accelerated focus. So if I'm at work, I focus on that work. If I'm talking about property investment, I'm focused on that. If I'm in a situation where I'm at home, I'm going to dial into those kids and I'm going to focus on those things. And if I have to work later and I can't be home, or in my case, if I'm in Phoenix, Arizona doing a talk and I'm not home, if I'm not home, I'm not home.
Yeah.
So again, accelerated focus is about dialing in to exactly what I'm doing, 10 seconds of guilt, or I acknowledge I feel guilty, bang, and then move on out, so exit the feeling. Sort of a funny thing. My mom gave me this, and growing up, and in 1975, my mom went to Saigon at the fall of Vietnam, at the fall end of the Vietnamese War, and my mom went over there as Saigon was falling to rescue orphans. She was a nurse, and she went on to write a book called This Must Be My Brother, and they did TV documentary things about this journey and everything else. But I was 5 years old, and my brother was 2, and I so often have wondered, you know, hang on, when you talk about, I mean, I've often thought if my wife came to me and said, listen, I'm going to go rescue orphan babies in a war-torn country, what would my response have actually been? So
How did you get to that decision?
How did you? But this was my mom, and my mom wanted to do this, and I've asked her, didn't you feel guilty? Didn't you feel guilty leaving a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old to go do this? And her response was, you know, Chris, absolutely. She said, 10 seconds of guilt, move on. It was what I wanted to do. I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to go out there. And there were. It was an incredible story. There were two jets, you know, filled with babies, and the first jet blew up, and my mom was supposed to be on that jet. It's one of my earliest memories of my whole life is my dad frantically getting on the phone trying to work out whether
We
she
saw
was
that
on that
vision
jet.
when it was falling, wasn't it? It was just chaotic,
So
wasn't it? Just
crazy.
the race was
So
crazy.
that was but anyway, 10 seconds of guilt, move on. And my mom always instilled that in me, that at the end of the day, listen, we all have this emotion, right, of feeling guilty or feeling like this anxiety or feeling that, you know, this risk, however you guys want to phrase that. Give yourself permission to go do what you want to do. Give yourself permission to get out there and make a difference in the world, make a difference in, you know, your financial situation, make a difference in your family situation, you know. And again, if I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, I'm going to dial into Phoenix, Arizona. If I'm at home, I'm going to dial into home, and really starting to control those circles without guilt.
And I want to finish up because there's a part in the book where at the end of the book you talk about don't use these useful beliefs for bad or, you know, for negative
for good,
things.
not evil.
You know, like if someone's going to have this 10 seconds of guilt and say, well, I just hurt that person and I'm going to move on. So obviously, you know, we're talking about
great
positive outcomes.
Great point. And, you know, I mean, look, the useful belief is there's a lot of freedom with it. And I think with that, the bottom line is you can believe whatever is going to give you power, what's going to give you power is important. And even if I went to the simplest place, useful belief, if I believe that rock is giving me power, you know, then I can go with that. That's good. And it's not hurting anybody. And I definitely distinctively make that point in the book.
You do. It's
as
really
soon as you're hurting someone else, I could carry this out. As soon as you're judging other people, as soon as you move yourself in a position where you're superior to someone else, it's no longer useful.
Correct.
Chris, can you show how you use useful belief in your life? You told the story at the Better Business Summit, which would be good for the listeners, how you're travelling, you're at airports, you're in hotels. Can you go through that one?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I did 175 talks last year, and that left me on. I counted them up for 20 for last year. I counted them up.
In how many countries?
Well, I did 7 overseas trips last year, and I've got 8 scheduled for this year already. So that'll probably do. But we've got. I did 117 airplane trips, and you know people are like, they love to take you down. So people love to, they come up to me and they say, Chris, you must hate all that travel. They love to say this. You must hate all those. Man, it must be tough being away. You must hate all those. You must be alone all the time. It must be tough. So again, I talk about reality. My reality is that I do this, and I live in Melbourne. I could only take Melbourne gigs. I could make that decision, but I'm not going to. So once again, going back to it, if I'm not going to change it, I might as well have a useful belief about it. So I'm not going to change it because I love doing what I do. So guess what? If travel's a part of that, and travel's the reality, what's my useful belief? I love airplanes. I love them. I love airports. I love airplane food. I love hotels. I love hotel sheets. I love being alone because I'm alone all the time. I'm alone. Walking the streets of Sydney alone. So I love aloneness. That's what I love.
No, it's good. I think because
Isn't that amazing? Then it just simply changes the perspective of everything. I can do the thing that I love, and yeah, there might be some things that are challenging. No, they're not challenging. I love them because I get to do what I love to do.
Yeah, and people are silly about it. Sometimes they come to me and they say, Chris, I went to a restaurant the other day and I had hair in my food, and I'm like, I love hair in my food. But it's in there, and at the end of the day, it makes people smile, it makes people laugh, and I think at the end of the day, you're right. It's a lot of the things that we have to go through, just part of life.
I think it's terrific because useful belief's better than positive thinking. Because I've travelled a lot in airports, not overseas, but for the show. I was forever in an airport on a Friday night, waiting for a plane at 9:30, and I'd often text my wife and say, just look how glamorous this television life is. Here I am sitting at the Sydney Airport lounge with nobody, waiting to get on a plane that's probably delayed. So by creating a useful belief that I'm really lucky that I'm in that position, that I get to travel, I get to do something I love, is really beneficial in that situation, because I could quite easily be depressed that it's a Friday night and I'm not home with my loved ones. So I think it's got terrific applicability.
And back to that focus, you're not with your loved ones when you're at the airport, so it's not useful. It's not useful to feel guilty.
Yeah.
So 10 seconds of guilt, acknowledge it, and then enjoy yourself at the airport. And then when you get home, focus on them.
And you turn that time into productive time too,
Absolutely,
don't you? Like you're a big podcast listener.
Yep.
Any great podcasts that you might want to get the listeners thinking of that they may not know about?
Oh, look, I love Malcolm Gladwell. That's a fun one at the moment.
You're at 10,000 hours?
Revisionist history. I'm a big believer in 10,000 hours.
Totally.
And I'm a big believer in strengths. And you know what? I've got my 10,000 hours in speaking, and that's, and it is that. It is owning that space. And I talk to real estate agents, and I say to them, listen, you got to know your space. And if you're going to sell between 2 streets and 2 avenues, and that sort of block is going to be your space, you do your 10,000 hours in that block, you're the best in the world at that space, right? And that's you own that space, and I'm a big believer in that.
Well, Glenn Cortino was all about that, wasn't he? Terms of, he knew that a property that Bryce had gone and bought or bidded on in 2007, he knew the street, he knew the actual property, he knew the aspect.
Where the kids went to school.
Who bought the property. I mean, that's the skill, isn't it? So subject matter expertise, the 10,000 hours, I'm a massive fan of that, because the reality is even though we want to be productive, in some cases, if we're only going to do property research on a Saturday morning and then spend $500,000, seriously?
Yeah.
Like that's just, that's a big effort. So we've got a few exciting things coming up around how to help people in terms of finding locations and that type of thing. So I'm just giving a little bit of a tip there. So watch out in the next couple of months. Something's going to be happening there.
Watch this space. Watch
this space.
Hey, Chris, can you tell us what the red Toyota theory means?
Well, going back to the brain filter, the red Toyota is obviously, if you drove in today, I drove in here today, I did not see a red Toyota. That's because I was not looking for a red Toyota. But if Bryce, we decided to buy a red Toyota together, then an amazing thing would happen. You know what? On the way home, I would see red Toyotas everywhere, and that's it. It's no different with a song that we hear for the first time. We go, oh, and then we hear that song over and over and over again. All of a sudden, we become aware of that song. That's the same thing tied into useful belief. That when I believe this is the best time in the history of the world to be alive, I can choose that belief. I do choose that belief. I believe it to be true. And you know what? When it's the best time in the history of the world to be alive, I walk outside and what do I see? I see a tree and a flower and a puppy and a baby, and I find beautiful things in the world, right? And by the way, if I believe these are tough times, tough times. As soon as I believe they're tough times, your brain's going to go find that as well. That's the red Toyota. Yeah. Bang, you're going to go find all those things. And by the way, you can probably pick up your local newspaper, and that will support you everything you need to find about how tough times are. And because obviously,
well, you talk about that in lowest common denominator thinking, don't you?
I think we have to be very aware. And being conscious is very much just being conscious, being awake and noticing what we're allowing in. We live in a society today that glamorizes fake celebrity, and I think we can let lowest common denominator thinking creep in at every possible turn.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, live your life. Make your beliefs, be the person you want to be. It's just so true. So, I mean, I've highlighted that whole section through there terms of that everything is not going to be okay. If you think like that, well, what do you think is going to happen? Yeah. There's no positive belief in that.
I think the biggest tip you can give, should have put it at the life hack, Ivis, but is to tap out of the news cycle, because most people set their alarm for 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning. First thing they hear is how many murders last night and how many people got robbed. Tap out of that, and as Tim Ferriss says in the 4-hour work week, if there's anything made, I know there was a cyclone last week, I know that the budget's coming up, I know that the big rocks of the news cycle, I'll find out about them, but I don't get caught up in the minutiae of what happens. And I've made an active decision in the morning to meditate for the first half an hour and then put something positive into my head for the second half an hour. And it's been a routine that I think serves me, because I don't get caught up with... I grew up in a household where the nightly news and a current affair was played all the time. Yeah. And so therefore I was conditioned to be fearful, and I just don't want my kids to have that news cycle in their house.
Can I read a section from the book?
Please.
I wanted to think instead about empowerment. I wanted power, not the kind that leads others to feel resentful or jealous, but rather the inner power that will allow me to feel that everything will be okay. After all, that belief is useful. What was the alternative? That everything wasn't going to be okay? So you're just making a choice, aren't you?
That's it. And, I don't know the exact numbers, but studies show, it's around 90% of the things that we worry about never come to fruition. Yeah. So we spend so much time focused on, worried about things that just aren't even real.
And bring that back to property. I mean, property investors are getting smashed up at the moment. We've got negative gearing, capital gains tax changes, we've got interest rates going high. The market's been very good, and there is going to be some headwinds. We've talked about winter is coming last year, and we're starting to see that play out now. But if I take that view, every time I look to make the leap into taking action, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not going to get anywhere. And if I take the long-term view that this is part of the natural cycle that happens in an economic cycle, so there will be a correction. How big that correction is will be determined on employment, will be determined on, what happens in the economy, both domestically and internationally, because we're a connected world. So if you're thinking about those in the short term, you will paralyse yourself. Whereas if you say, well, you know what, the world's going to get better, job growth will come back at some point, the economy will restabilise, so property prices will continue to grow.
Mate, you've been terrific at that. I've got to say, sometimes I lean on you for that. I think you're really terrific at that. And it's always reminding yourself when unemployment goes up from 4 to 6%, and everyone, just remember the flip side of that is 94% are employed, not the 6% are unemployed.
Totally.
I think on that too, we talked about clear goals drive behavior. We were talking about that earlier. Again, if you're only living in today, it's very easy to be on the hamster wheel of life, and we're just rotating through days. I'm very big as well that it's useful to sit down and say, hey, 1 year from now, for me to actually walk up to you guys and say, listen, I've had the best year of my life. For me to say that in 1 year time, tell me, what did we start doing, stop doing, and keep doing? And that level of, you can blow that out 5 years, and say 5 years from now, what do I have as a property investor? What do I have as a buyer? 5 years from now, for me to say, I'm really happy with where I'm at with this, and this, what does that look like? Yeah. And with that level of clarity, once we've got that level of clarity, then that will drive our behavior, and we got the criteria for moving forward.
And that's why we're so passionate about making the invisible visible. So, Chris, what we do is we do a lot of cash flow modelling. We're passionate about this podcast, teaching people how to manage money. We've got this Money Smarts concept that people are downloading every day of the week, and we think that that's great because it's giving them some principles and some frameworks to help manage their money. And when they are managing their money, they can actually get confidence around, hey, 1 year, I'm going to be in a better financial position. 5 years, my financial position is going to be even better. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling good about the way in which this is playing itself out. But if you just don't put the goals in place or don't have a written plan or something like that, you're moving on that hamster wheel through life, just bouncing off the walls and, not having any clear direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you talk about in the book that you've got to master your timeline. What does that actually mean? How do people do that?
Well, so on that, get clear about what that future looks like. Be aware very much about living in the present, living in the now, being present, being mindful, being connected, so that we're clear about the future. We live very much in the moment. And then we have to be careful of that one nasty time zone that's going to try to stop you, and that's the past. Because, again, going back to useful belief, here's a couple for your listeners. Everything happens for a reason. And, everything that's ever happened in your life happens for a reason. And that's a useful belief. When we believe that every link in the chain of our life led us to be in this room here today, and this room here today is the exact room that we're supposed to be in to launch the rest of our lives. Every one of those things, part of the human condition called life is we have bad things happen. And I think why people have resonated so much with the book Useful Belief and with the talks on useful belief is that we've all had bad things happen. And you know what? That business didn't work out, that job didn't work out, that relationship failed, that those people passed away. And really mastering your timeline is really taking a look at that every single thing happened for a reason. Here's a useful belief. You had the parents you were supposed to have. Well, some people had terrible parents, but some people had great parents and everything in between. But ultimately, they were your parents. That's your reality. You can't change that reality. So you might as well have a useful belief about it. What did you learn from them? What did you learn that you don't want to do? Yeah. It's all part of your story, and mastering your story and really owning that story. I actually came up with the 2 words useful belief for the first time over the Pacific Ocean. And I say that I was flying from San Francisco to Sydney, and I was coming back from my father's funeral. And I was coming back to do 18 presentations the next 4 weeks, and I didn't feel like doing them. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel positive. I didn't feel, I felt the opposite. I felt sad and angry, and I didn't feel like doing them. And all of a sudden I realized I have to change my belief. I need a more useful belief. And literally I wrote the 2 words down for the first time. And what I came up with was this. My useful belief was going to be that those 18 audiences were going to give me the greatest gift they could possibly give me. They were going to give me their time. And when somebody gives you their time, that's the greatest gift. And it's very much become part of my philosophy now that when someone gives you their time, it's my job to give you everything I've got in that space. But really understand that, I wrote those 2 words down, useful belief, and I started to think about what are some other useful beliefs that I could have that are going to help me. And you know what? Bad things happen to good people, and bad things happen to good people all the time. And you know what? Some of those things, there's going to be a point to grieving. And grieving, by the way, is useful. Grieving's a part of the process. But at what point does grieving stop being useful? And at what point do we go, that's enough. I need to make that move from here. I need to turn that thing into learning. I need to turn that thing into celebration. Whatever those things are.
As opposed to blame.
As opposed to guilt, as opposed to blame, as opposed to regret, all those different things. It's life, these are the things that have happened in our life. Where are we today? Where do we want to get to? So it's clarity in the future. We live in the moment, and we absolutely have, we're guilt-free about the past because every single thing taught us something, and it led us to be here, and none of us are perfect. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is perfection gets in the way of the great. And you talk about people trying to be perfect, make all perfect decisions in their life, whether they're investing and they need to be perfect, that actually paralyzes them. And perfection, it doesn't need to be perfect. People don't need to be perfect. What they need to be is great. And so often, the mistakes are part of the beauty.
Yeah, I always think that perfectionists think they've got really high standards, but I've got the view they have no standards at all because they haven't worked out what's the point where it's acceptable or not. So excellence better than perfection. But if perfectionists, they can never reach anything. They've actually got the lowest standards of all. So, hey, you in the book you say when something major happens, you've 2 questions: why did this happen? Yeah. And what did I learn from it? That's a good extension.
And that ties in. Yeah. Why did it happen? What did I learn from it? That's gold. To sit down and for people just to be nice to themselves. Everyone stuffs up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 3 levels of wisdom. The one where you can stand now and look behind and see what's happened, exactly what you just said, everything happened for a reason.
Yep.
Then the second level of wisdom is that in the moment, everything will be as it should be.
Good.
And then the third level of wisdom is, well, if everything's all right in the back and everything's all right here, going forward, everything should be okay.
That's good. Useful belief straight down the line. That's good.
Brilliant.
You break down useful beliefs into a bunch of bullets. So for the listeners to be able to activate this into their life, what are those?
So the 7 bullets that I talk about, number 1, time management, which we alluded to before. Ask yourself, what are useful actions? What are the things that are not useful? Really start thinking about, and as we go through every day, we map that out. What does that look like? Number 2, I talk about act as if. And success leaves clues. Coding success. Really, code success and replicate is act as if. So act as if is, if I want to be a great parent, what do great parents do? What do they watch? What do they read? How do they carry themselves? Do they coach their kids' team? If I want to be a great salesperson, what do great salespeople do? Right? And I can act as if, and I can start to put those things into place. So really taking a look at what greatness is all about and starting to bring those attributes in. Number 3 is really body language, and I talk about useful matching of body language, matching in different intensity. Number 4 is being present, that it is useful to be present. I think we've alluded to. Number 5, gratitude. And this is an interesting one. Do you spend the time during your day thinking about what you have or what you do not have? And I'm a big believer. Take a look at what the first 7, 8, 9, 10 things you say to start your day. What are those things? What as we listen to the brain language, to go back to that again. And so many people wake up and they go, oh, I got that meeting today and I can't believe that. I got to go see my boss. And all that, negativity happens before they look in the mirror. That's where the abuse really starts. And, there they are. What is that? Oh, man, no. Right, and there they are. So really thinking about gratitude, thinking about what we have instead of what we do not have. Number 6 is energy. You can't do any of this stuff without energy, and one of my useful beliefs is energy is a decision. I am an energetic person, and that's your line, by the way. I mean, I am an energetic person, and for you to really, have that as a useful belief every day. I have more energy than I had 10 years ago. I have more energy than I had 20 years ago. Again, energy is a choice. You can dial into that, and again, that mind-body loop, what the mind harbors. Energy is a choice. The body manifests. Bang! Now I've got that energy. And number 7, I talk about taking action. And again, as you just spoke about, really being clear about that timeline and going and get it.
Very good stuff.
And look,
really
grab the
practical.
book. It's unpacked amazingly in the book, so we'll make sure we get the show notes off and give you the link where you can buy the book.
We'll have all Chris's details. I'm sure you're on social media, Instas and everything. We'll put all those up there as well. So the last thing you talked about was,
this is like negotiation. This is a negotiating tactic. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm glad you love it. It's gotten amazing feedback.
So the positive, negative. For the benefit of our listeners, some of our listeners are professional salespeople, but some people are day-to-day work. But for the broader people, you can use it at home, you can use it at life.
All right.
Life everywhere.
I talk about this as the tool of persuasion, the ultimate tool of persuasion. And again, so you can tie that in negotiation, closing, however you want to fit that in. But it's positive, negative. Its basis is that every single thing we do as human beings is based on one of 2 things. And I think as a salesperson, as a person of influence, as a negotiator, we have to understand that everything we do, whether it's going to the gym, some people love to go to the gym, and you go to the gym because it gives you pleasure. Other people go to the gym only to avoid pain, only to avoid expanding body parts. And every single thing that we do is based on either pain or pleasure. Actually, and just quick note for your listeners, ask yourself how many things in your life actually give you joy. How many joy things do you have in your life versus how many obligations do you have? Starting to think about finding more joy moments, less obligation moments. But the obligations that you do have, again, if you're not going to change them, let's have a useful belief about them and turn them into joy moments. Here we go. So based on that, we've got this tool of 3 positives or 3 gain pleasures followed by an avoid pain. And I suppose to illustrate it, I was going on stage in New Zealand, and this woman came up to me and she's like, Chris, I got to just tell you, I love positive, negative. And I was like, that's fantastic. And she said, I use this with my 5-year-old. I'm like, what? Use it with your 5-year-old? And she told me the story. She said, there I am with little Jasmine. And I say to Jasmine, Jasmine, I just got off the phone from Stephanie's mom. And guess what? We're going to go to the park, positive, right? We're going to go have a picnic, positive. And you know what? We're going to go bring our dolls and we'll have a party, positive, right? And then she drops the hammer, as we say, with the negative. And she looks at Jasmine and she says, now, Jasmine, What would be a shame is if you don't clean your room and I have to call Stephanie's mom and cancel. Right? And that's dropping the hammer. So in the context, obviously, of a real estate negotiation, and there I am, and I say, listen, Bryce, this house has the 4-bedroom accommodation you've been looking for. It's in the school zone that you want. It's got the land size, everything going your way. And again, those beautiful words, what would be a shame? What would be a shame is if you don't jump at this right now and you let me open this house on Saturday. Because if you open this house on Saturday, you end up spending 10, 20,000 more. Yeah. Let's do this thing. And so positive, whoop-boom, drop the hammer with what would be a shame. It's gold. It's gold. People have loved it.
Absolutely brilliant.
I actually have used it with my 6-year-old. I've got to say, since I heard.
Well, I've gone home and Jane's naturally using it. I'm like, where did you get that from?
Yeah. She's been listening to Chris.
Yeah, obviously.
No, she's been listening to Chris. So what's useful beliefs been a big part of your life, and you're a big part of the speaking circle. What's the talks focusing on going forward?
So I talk a lot on influence. So my first book was the Ultimate Book of Influence, and so I do a lot of talks on influence. So again, winning face to face and how we go win business. Useful belief has been huge in terms of just people wanting me to talk about that at their conferences. Moving forward, I got a brand new keynote that I'm excited about called Cut the Noise. And Cut the Noise is Useful Belief 2.0 in a way, but it is really moving to a place now in this world where we are inundated, as we've talked about, with information, really working through, for an organization just to become more effective. The bottom line is, how do we become more effective as individuals? What are the things that matter? What are the things that don't matter? And so that we can really streamline that. And again, no guilt. Boom. That we're in a situation, we give ourselves permission to do the things that matter and permission not to do the things that don't matter. And I'm a big believer. I just quickly, I was at university. When I was at university, I had a buddy called Scott, and Scott had a big car. Anyway, what was great about it is, Scott. Anyway, one day I got in Scott's car and the oil light was on, and I said, Scott, the oil light's on your car, mate. Let's go put some oil in your car. And he goes, no, I'll do it later. Next time I got in Scott's car, the oil light was on in Scott's car. I said, Scott, let's go, mate, I'll show you how to do it. Let's go put some oil in your car. And he goes, no, I'll do it later. Next time I got in Scott's car, there was a business card on the dashboard. I said, Scott, why is there a business card on your dashboard? He goes, I got sick of looking at the oil light. Now, the older I get, the more I love that story. I mean, you couldn't make that up. But you know what? The reality for everybody, the reality for everybody is we all know what our oil light is. We know the things that we're supposed to start doing, stop doing. We know what those things are. They stare at you every single day. Yet most people prefer to put a business card and actually block that oil light. You know what it is. So really taking a look at Cut the Noise. What's the thing that you need to take action on in your life?
That's what a great way to finish.
Great way to finish.
Man, we've got to get you back on again sometime in the future. This has been brilliant.
Awesome.
But I think you'll agree there, folks, that slight deviation from the mechanics of property investing, but I don't think a slight deviation from the bigger picture, because it's all about having the right asset, the right strategy, the right mentor, and the right mindset. And today was all about getting the right mindset. So I think that's been terrific. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks so much, guys, for having me.
We certainly appreciate it. Now, Ben, in terms of my life hack today, is because I've read Chris's book, I've listened to his presentation.
Yes.
And for me, the attitude of gratitude. The gratitude journal is something that I've implemented in the last 6 months, and it's made a huge change for me, because it's effectively focusing what I have rather than what I don't have.
Yes.
And so every night I do 3 things I'm grateful for, and the last thing is I just run through the day in my mind, and it's, how could I have done today better? But I just think that if the gratitude attitude, I don't know how you found this, Chris, but it can sometimes feel like, I'd like to thank Goodyear for the tyres for getting me here. I'd like to thank that I live in Australia, and it becomes a tick, 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 done, and it doesn't really sink into your heart. So Tim Ferriss comes up with a couple of questions. 1, you can ask yourself, what's a relationship that you really helped you or that you valued highly? 2, what's an opportunity you had today? 3, something great that happened yesterday. And 4, and this comes from Tony Robbins, I think I've mentioned in the podcast prior, something simple near you or within sight, so that it actually gives you that grounding. I'm thankful right now that Melbourne is turning on some of the best autumn weather that I can ever remember. Something as simple as that can help you be really, really grateful. So I think that's a natural extension of what Chris has spent the last 45 minutes talking about. There's 2 things that of all my reading and all the listening, that there's 2 things that I see consistent of all the high achievers. 1 is they have mindfulness or meditation of some sort, and 2 is they're grateful for what they have, and that's from billionaires right down to paupers. So
totally, we can fall fall onto that hamster wheel. We can get depressed. Sometimes we don't even know we're depressed.
Yep.
But if we can just make these baby steps into changing attitude, changing drive, and then taking action, the world's yours.
Well, as the listeners know, I love anything where you can create. I didn't know until I met Chris that I wanted to be creating better, useful beliefs. I do know what it is now, but anything to do with mindset's great. I reached out to Chris and said, will you come on and talk to our community? It's been really great to give up his time today, which we appreciate. For you, did you know?
Look, just to wrap up today, just the did you know. I just wanted to link it back into, it's a quote we've got in the book as well, which was basically, Benjamin Franklin once said, an investment in knowledge pays the best interest. And today is about an investment in you. And if you can make that investment into you, you should start to see the benefits in that over time.
Yeah, good stuff, mate. So I think that's been terrific. I'd love to hear from our listeners, Ben, on Facebook. Give us a shout.
Totally.
Instagram. Let us know what you thought of this, because I personally love this stuff. I love the fact that we had Chris on today, and we'd love to do more of it going into the future. So
ping Chris on Twitter or whatever and say loved you on the podcast.
Any social media that they can catch you on, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. They can join me on Facebook. They can join me on LinkedIn. They can Instagram.
We'll have it all on the face.
And Twitter, all the above. They'll find me. It's easy enough.
We'll
Helder.
put it in the show notes. For those of you listening to this on the train, just click on the actual picture. Ibis and Crystal do a ripper job of getting all of that stuff in, so that you guys can just click. And whilst you're there, Ben, it certainly helps us. A favour from, I said it a couple of weeks ago, a favour to our listeners who have been with us from day one. From day one. Those new listeners, you don't have to do this, but for those who've got value from our podcast, if they could just go to the iTunes or our website and just leave us a 5-star review, it actually is helping us.
Just a review. You determine whether we're 5-star.
We've got a 4-star.
We've got a 4-star. Because we talk too much footy, Chris.
Yeah. so we can't have that. And if you are a first-time listener today, you are lucky. Number one, because you heard some terrific stuff. But our recommendation to you is to go back to episode number 1 and start from the beginning, because it's actually incremental. The frameworks build upon build. So if you come late to the party, it's going to be well worth your while to go back. And a little technique, a little life hack there, Ibis, is to do it at 1.5 speed, so that you can get through that very, very quickly. And for those of you who haven't taken advantage of what Ben said before, go to thepropertycouch.com.au, the homepage there, download the Money Smarts. That stuff we should be charging $250 for that stuff, Ben, but we're giving it out for free.
Yes.
And quite often when you give it out for free, no one places any value on it. But because we want to give to our community, we're doing it for free. But go and get it.
Definitely.
Download it,
and
implement it. Into your life, because you will create some wonderful, useful beliefs from doing that. The last thing, if you want to join the conversation, at the Property Couch, at Bryce Holdaway, at Ben Kingsley AU, and of course we'll put all the links to Chris in the show notes. So, mate,
perfect. And buy his books.
Buy his books.
They're gold.
They are gold. They are. And I've got to tell you, he's written it purposely in a style that makes it easy to finish in one sitting.
Correct. It's just, you can get through it straight away in one night or one plane flight, mate.
Particularly if your useful belief is you like sitting in airport lounges with time to read some books. But thanks again, Chris. We appreciated your time.
Yeah, terrific.
Awesome.
And
Thanks, guys.
And until next week, Ben.
See you later.
See ya.